Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today, inshallah, we will start chapter 5, which is regarding earnestness, perseverance, and assiduity, which in Arabic is Jad, Mu'adhaba, and Himma. Jad means effort, Jaddo Jahad, meaning to strive. Mu'adhaba is, in essence, continuity or steadfastness. And Himma is uh, capacity, meaning effort as well. So these are three attributes which are crucial for any seeker of knowledge. And in fact, they're crucial for anybody who wants to achieve anything. You have to work hard, you have to remain steadfast in your approach, and you have to have a high level of capacity and ability in that regard in pursuing your goals. And so the author here talks about them in chapter 5 and highlights them and makes some very interesting points as well. So he says, earnestness, perseverance, and assiduity are indispensable in the quest for knowledge. This is indicated in the Quran in the very words of Allah Azza wa Jal, who says, those who have earnestly worked hard in our cause, we shall surely guide them to our ways. So the famous verse, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. That those who do mujahada, struggle or strive, he said, earnestly strive. Those who strive in our ways, Allah, we will show them, guide them to our paths. And this really highlights a golden principle in our deen, that the successful person is the one who tries the hardest, that the one who puts the most effort in. It doesn't matter about the outcome. Allah Azza wa Jal wants to see your efforts. And that's called mujahada. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And if somebody does that, eventually Allah Azza wa Jal will open the doors which lead to him. And that's what the verse of the Quran also confirms. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا, the ones who do mujahada, who are always struggling and striving. It is said that he who seeks something and is industrious in doing so shall find it. And he who knocks at the door and is persistent shall enter. So the one who persistently knocks the door will enter. The one who's industrious in seeking something will find that thing. I was just talking about this in relation to seeking knowledge earlier with someone. That and the author himself talks about it later as well. That there's no substitute for youth, because the youth, they tend to have a lot more zeal about them, the zeal of youth, that if they have a desire to attain something, they just go for it. And one of the best du'as you can ever make for your children is that Allah Azza wa Jalla creates the desire within them to acquire understanding, or Allah Ta'ala creates or puts the desire within them to do good deeds and to study the deen. Because if a young person desires to do something, what you'll find is that they will do it, right? Because they have that in them, they're more adventurous. When you get older, you're more tired, you just don't have that same himma as you do when you're a youngster. Your mind is not as fresh. You've got years of baggage, you've got lots of other pressures, responsibilities, and so on. So when a young person has that desire, and the desires are positive, in other words, then that there's no limit to what they can achieve. Because if they have that desire, then they will work hard for that. They'll do whatever is required to achieve that. Now, the problem is young people, of course, most of their desires are negative, a lot of them are. And so they just go off the rails completely. So if Allah Ta'ala puts positive desires in our children's hearts, then actually even parenting is easy, because you don't have to force children or young teenagers to do the right thing, because they want to do it anyway, you see. So um that's what the author is saying as well. In the next sentence, he says, it is said that you will reach what you desire to the extent that you pursue it. Okay, so you have to desire it and then you have to pursue it. It is said as well that industriousness of three kinds of people is essential in the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. So he's talking about, hard work is essential for three types of people: the student, the teacher, and the father. Student, teacher, and father. Those are the three he mentions, um, which is interesting. The student, of course, that they have to work very, very hard in their lessons to pass the exams and so on. Teacher, because they have to set an example, and if they're really going to be a good teacher, they have to work hard within their own research and to prepare the lesson for the students. Um, but also in terms of literary works, in terms of speeches, in terms of classes. So they have to work hard in a different way. And father, because the father is the head of the household, it's his responsibility to ensure that everybody in this care is taken care of. Okay, so the industriousness of three kinds of people is essential. Um, and then he goes on and he talks about, in fact, there's a poem, I'll just read the poem out, um, by Imam Sadid ad-Din al-Shirazi. He said he recited to me a poem composed by Imam Shafi'i. Earnest application makes accessible every remote affair. So hard work makes every remote affair accessible, and industriousness opens every locked door. The creature of Allah, most worthy of grief, is a man of high aspiration who is worn out by a life of straitened circumstances. Proof of divine destiny and its wisdom are in the afflictions of the wise and the easy life of the fool. Lack of wealth will nourish intellectual power. They are opposites, how far apart are the two? Right. So this poem by Imam Shafi'i sets out nicely how it informs the merits of industriousness and aspiration and so on. He goes on and he says, it is essential in the seeking of knowledge to maintain a vigil throughout the night. Okay, it is said, take night as your camel, with it you shall attain your hope. I myself, meaning the author, made up a poem on this theme. He who desires to carry out all his aspirations should use his nights as the camel on his road to reach them. Diminish your food in order to maintain a vigil, if you wish, my friend, to attain perfection. All right, so part of this, essentially, what they're saying is that hard work and a sincere endeavor, a manifestation that a person is serious about doing those things and having those qualities, is that they make use of their nights. They make use of the time at nighttime. He goes on and he says, it is said, he who keeps watch at night will rejoice in his heart during the day. And that's one of the secrets of night prayers, is that the person who engages in night prayers, uh, they will see wonders in their heart, which are shown from their heart and the sentiments therein during the day. It becomes very, very sensitive. Um, but also, if somebody prays and holds vigils at night, one of the effects of that is it opens the mind and it opens the heart. You see, so Allah Azza wa Jal puts more wisdom and understanding within us, within our minds, and within our hearts. And so when we're seeking to attain our goals, all of a sudden we'll find that we have a greater himmah to achieve them. Okay, because this is the chapter of himmah, isn't it? So we have to have the himmah to read the night prayer. And if we do have the himmah, Allah Azza wa Jal will increase it even more. So there's a lot of there's a lot of great treasures in the night prayer. It's one of the keys to wilayat, without a shadow of a doubt. In the search of knowledge, one must persevere in study and repetition, both at the beginning of the night and at its end. For the time between dusk and the hour of dawn is a blessed time. Okay, so when we're talking about studying the deen, it's not just about ibadah at night. But the author is saying that, remember, the objective that we're talking about is attaining knowledge. That he says that we have to spend some part of the night at the beginning of the night and at the end of the night studying the deen, right? So revising lessons, learning more, and educating ourselves. Okay, but the issue for most people is that they perhaps have not had the capacity to engage in a serious form of education. But so that's what we have to do to start with, and part of that, and on the way to achieve success in that, is to study in the evenings and first thing in the morning, some kind of learning. In the quest for learning, one must make use of the days or of youth and adolescence. That's what I was just mentioning. It is said, by the amount of work you do, you will obtain what you strive for. So he who strives for a goal stays up by night. Make use of the days of early youth, for verily the period of youth does not remain with you. Okay? The period of youth does not remain. Um, Studying later in life is a great blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal. In other words, it's better late than never. But if we are able to do so when we're young, the sky is the limit. I mean, what young people can learn and what they have the capacity to do is absolutely tremendous. And it's just a question of navigating them. So most people who are listening, are still young, mashallah, but many of them are now at an age where they're either married, looking to get married, or they have children. So always emphasize the importance of education to your children. Find avenues for people to teach them. But we must make sure that it's not just about spoon feeding them knowledge, spoon feeding them information. Part of it is to create or to prepare their minds to absorb that information, that knowledge. So nurturing their minds is crucial, especially at a young age. The question is, how do you nurture young people's minds, and which prepares it to take in sacred knowledge? One of the ways that I've spoken about, I think I might have spoken about before, is always speak to a child and discuss things with them, as opposed to dictating what's right and wrong. It doesn't matter how old your child is, even, of course, they have to be at an age where they can have some kind of a discussion. So let's say 5, 6, 7 plus, but always speak to them. Let's say if you're over dinner, or let's say if you're traveling somewhere, ask them about things. Do you have any questions? What do you think about this? It doesn't have to be religion. It could be anything. Uh, do you have any questions like that? I do that with my daughter, and she's obviously she's only 7. She's 6, just turned 7. So the example I'm giving her, she was 6. So when we're driving, I said, "But did you have any questions?" Is then say, "What are you thinking about? Is there anything?" And she says, "Yeah, flats." She's just got this thing with tower blocks of flats. So she says, "Oh, flats. Why are they?" And she asked me something about that. So it might be completely random, but the point is that what it does is having that a discussion about anything for a young person. It teaches them how to think, how to rationalize, and how to understand principles of life, whether they're dunya related or deen related. You see, but what that also does is that creates a friendship of sorts, or a communication link between you and your child, so that it's no longer a case of I say, you do, but rather it's a discussion that you can then navigate and also nurture the child's mind in that process. You see, now eventually, if you keep up this process of nurturing, discussing, questioning, discussing their questions, answering questions, posing questions to them, eventually what will happen is that you will talk about religion and you will talk about deen. And so therein you can try to create that momentum and that interest. Right. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is just simply leading by example. Right? So if we want our children to make the most of their youth, we have to lead by example. I mean, children look up to their parents in their formative years. All children, when they're young, they look up to their parents. It's when they become teenagers that they might become rebellious. So the key is to ensure that they see a good example when they're young, meaning really young, right? So if they always see you with a topi, if they always see you with a jubba, if they always see you with a hijab, for example, or holding the Quran, or doing lessons, or reading namaz, or doing wudu, going to the masjid, the children, 9 times out of 10, will have an inclination towards those same things. I've seen it so many times, you see. So, you know, those are things which for sure can assist in creating the culture of learning within young people. Um, okay, but also studying. So if you want your children to study, then we must study ourselves. We must dedicate our time to studying, and our children should see that. Yeah, look, what's my father doing now? What's my mother doing now? What they're doing, they're studying the deen, or they're teaching, or they're doing a zikr gathering, or they're partaking in a zikr gathering. And that's what our children should be associating with us, you see. And sometimes they might think, well, that's a bit annoying, or I'd rather you play with me now. Why can't you spend time with me now? Those things are also a part and parcel of it. But when even within that, there's lessons as well, you see. So if your child wants you to play with them, but you have a lesson, right? Within the sacrificing of that play for the sake of the lesson, there's a principle in there for the child, isn't it? That sometimes you have to sacrifice your play for the sake of the lesson, right? Now they can't, of course, you know, digest or kind of truly understand the principle that we're speaking about, but it's the message that they will receive and they will understand over time. That yeah, when I was young, I played with my father or my mother, but there were times they wouldn't play with me because they had lessons. So when they grow up, they will not be afraid to do that as well. So, I can play, but actually I've got a lesson to do first. You see, so little things like this make a massive difference. See, so the author refers to youth and making the most of your youth in passing, but it's just a huge thing, huge thing, and especially with the issues that young people have today. It's even more important to create a culture, at least within our homes, and aim to do so in the wider community, whereby our children can flourish and be the best that they can possibly be. Okay, so the author then he talks about something, makes an interesting point just to balance things out. He said, but in order to pursue knowledge, one should not exhaust nor weaken oneself so that one cuts oneself off from work. On the contrary, one should practice temperance in this respect. For moderation is one great source of all success. Okay, so in other words, even spending time studying, night times, worshiping, whatever it may be, but don't tire yourself to the extent whereby you can't even work anymore. You can't do anything anymore because the deen is one of moderation, and it's such a blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal that He has allowed us to reach our true potential whilst maintaining moderation, right? So whilst we maintain moderation, we can still excel in our academic studies, but also in our spiritual life. We can become extremely close to Allah whilst looking after your family, whilst going to work, and whilst worshipping uh, in the obligatory prayers, but also optional prayers. But so, in other words, it's not only those who spend 24 hours a day and doing deen work, that is a great blessing from Allah for sure. But it's not only them that become close to Allah, those who have other circumstances whereby they have to work or they have other commitments, they're not actually, then they are not impeded in their journey to Allah in doing so. So the secrecy of moderation. That Allah Azza wa Jal does not if someone has moderation in what they do, that's not a barrier to their relationship with Allah. In fact, it's enhanced because they are following the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in being moderate in everything that they do. So don't be overly zealous is really the message. The Messenger of Allah said, indeed, this religion of mine is solidly grounded, so enter into it with moderation. Okay, enter into it with moderation. So the question is, what is moderation for me? What is moderation for you? I would suggest that for most people, committing at least 2 to 3 hours a week for the religion in your spare time is a good starting point. Okay, now this is 1 hour. Well, at most it's an hour. So, so you should be able to find 2 other hours during the week or the weekend whereby you spend either attending lessons, reading, reciting Quran, apart from the obligatory things I'm talking about, whether it's 10 minutes on the prayer mat at night, whether it's 10 minutes in the morning after Fajr prayer, people obviously have their own commitments, whether it's memorizing a surah, whether it's memorizing some Arabic vocabulary, reading a book, is for each person to decide. And then naturally, depending on your position in that Allah has given you, that will dictate how much time you spend. So when we talk about moderation and balance, actually there's no one shoe fits all. It depends who you are, what your duty is, meaning in Allah, what the duty that Allah has given you, and the responsibilities that you have. That dictates the balance that you have in your life. So if you're a president, I mean, it even applies in the world in the dunyawi sense, is that if you're a president of a country, the time that you're going to spend with your family is minimal, but that's the balance for you because you're running a country. And similarly, if you are a teacher, if you are, a guide or someone who has um, lots of followers and students and whatever it may be, then your balance will be different from the person who's studying once a week or something. But the aspiration should always be there to be serving as much as we can. In seeking knowledge, it is important to aspire to the highest level of learning, since man flies by his aspirations as a bird flies with its wings. Okay, so this talks about targets, aspirations, and again, I've spoken about this before, is that we must never compromise on our aspirations. We must always aim to be the highest of the high, not because we want to be acknowledged as such, but because Allah is great enough to take us there, right? So when we say we want to be, we want to be the closest person to Allah Azza wa Jal, we want to be the greatest, the most knowledgeable person, we want to be the most righteous person. And you might think, well, how can I do that? I don't have the ability to do that. I'm not righteous enough. I don't have the right qualities. But the point is this, that your aspiration is not based on your ability. Your aspiration is based on Allah's ability. And Allah's ability is infinite. Therefore, your aspirations should be infinite. That's how we have to, the mindset that we have with our goals, right? So, always aim for the highest because Allah is the one who can make something happen. And the more certainty we have in that, the more strength we will have in our intentions, you see. Now, then the steps afterwards, in terms of, okay, well, we're aiming for the highest, how do we get there? We haven't even taken the first step. Then what happens is the hard work. So aspire, making genuine intention, and then work hard. You just have to slog it out. And if Allah just gives you the tawfiq that you actually aspire the highest things, alhamdulillah. But the point is that you've aimed high, you've intended the greatest, and you worked as hard as you can, but actually you didn't get anywhere. The beauty of it is innamal a'malu binniyat in that scenario, that actions are based on intentions. So you're still a win-win. Right. So if you actually get there, you're a winner. If you don't get there, you're still a winner because your intention was there. You see, so whichever way you turn, Allah's mercy is there, and Allah Azza wa Jal is looking for ways to drag you up, meaning towards heaven, right? Towards Him. It's just for us to then find the mechanism that works for us, but a lot of it is in the mind. And all of these things actually that he's talking about now, when we talk about the juhud, mujahada, and himma, a lot of these things it's not down to physicality, because if you're generally in good health, then it's fine. It's all a matter of the mind. is mental strength, right? So having the mental strength to maintain your discipline, to study when you need to study, right? And having the himma, having the mental strength not to allow your laziness to overcome you, to overcome the state that we find ourselves in, to actually stand up and pray our Tahajjud prayers and our Fajr prayers, right? And now there is a physical element there, of course there is, but it's mind over matter. It's not because our bodies are actually exhausted, it's just because we can't be bothered. And that's in the mind, you see. So I think, when we talk about these qualities, it's and studying Deen generally, a lot of it comes down to mental strength and training ourselves in that way. The chief aids in the acquisition of things are industriousness and high ambition. So hard work and ambition, which we've spoken about. He who aspires to memorize all of the books of Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani, meaning the student of Imam Abu Hanifa, who aspires to memorize them and adds hard work and perseverance, will surely retain the greater part of these books, or at least half. But if one has high aspiration but does not have hard work, or has hard work but lacks high aspiration, he will not attain except a small amount of knowledge. So you have to have both, right? And to be honest with you, you can even argue if you genuinely had high aspirations, you by definition you must work for it. Because if you don't work for it, that means you don't really want it. You see, you don't really have that goal. It's like a pie in the sky, and armchair critics sitting at home doing nothing. Yeah, I want to be a great scholar. Yeah, okay, and then just carrying watching TV for the next 10 years. So the fact that you watch TV for 10 years and you've taken no actual steps means that your aspiration was not genuine, right? So the author is mentioning that you need both, but really, if you're genuine in your aspiration, you will work hard for it. Okay, it's a logical necessity. Then otherwise, it's false. It's a false claim. Okay, it is said, "Do not make haste in your affairs, but proceed slowly with them, for nothing will straighten your stick like a slow fire." Imam Abu Hanifa said to Qadi Abu Yusuf, his student, "You are unlearned, but assiduity in your studies made you emerge from your ignorance. But beware of laziness, for it is misfortune and a great calamity." So two things which he mentions here. The first is that don't haste. Now, this is another golden rule for the acquisition of learning, the acquisition of knowledge even, is that don't be hasty, because this is a disease which we all suffer from now, which is a real side effect of the modern world, that we need everything now. And it's not even we want it now, we want it yesterday. And if it hasn't come yesterday, why has it not come yesterday? And we can't wait, we can't tolerate delays in any of our matters, right? Whether it be food, delivery, internet, telephone, televisions, all of the goods that we have, we need instant everything, even our coffee, even our food. It's just the same everywhere you look now. And even where we want to achieve something, we find it very hard. People find it very hard to persevere in things now. Young people as well. I mean, we see it in our workplaces that young people, they don't have the same work ethic. They don't want to put the hours in. They can't do the hard slog. If they have to use their brain for too long, they just start withering away. And whereas the previous generation, our parents' generation, they were the opposite. They were so hardworking, great work ethic, get things done. They knew how to, and never rush things, thorough, attention to detail. All the good qualities were in our parents' generation, or we're in the middle. Now, the next generation, a lot of the qualities have just completely disappeared because there's a TikTok generation. But when studying the Deen, one mustn't be hasty. because Allah Azza wa Jal loves to see someone who does something consistently. And especially when you're studying things like Arabic or doing serious studies, what you find is that each lesson you're just adding on more and more and more and more, and you can't be hasty because you're learning a language which will open up doors to the Quran and Sunnah. So you can't be hasty, right? And there's no substitute to reading the whole book. Now, again, the internet has made us hasty. This is destroying the culture of learning because rather than reading a book behind me to find a reference, you just go online, you can type it up and you can find the reference in 10 seconds, as opposed to reading the book. Okay, where's this reference? Let me read this chapter, let me understand this chapter. Everything is now become for reference as opposed to just reading it and finding things that way and learning that way. It's just instantaneous, you see. So even for students of knowledge, it's a big challenge this to just stick to certain classical methods, and there's great merit in that because it just preserves that those qualities within us for the sake of the learning, but also within us as individuals that you didn't take the shortcut, you went the long way around, but you did it for the right reasons, and people will be stronger as a result of that. So don't make haste. Be consistent. Always move forward, but don't be hasty because if you're hasty and you're expecting results, tomorrow, then you won't get them. Students of knowledge will tell you, for example, if you have studied, even for myself, you talked about 20 years ago I started, and even now it's like you feel like you haven't studied anything. You feel like there's so many things you're learning all the time. But it's always a slow progress. Okay. And then second thing was laziness, right? It's all the things that we are embody today. We need the opposite of those things to study the deen. Laziness. So there's another poem he mentions here, or a saying of an imam. Oh, my soul, do not become lax in your work of piety, justice, and good works, carried on in calmness. For each one who does good deeds experiences happiness, while each one who acts in a lazy manner has afflictions and unhappiness. Okay, the one who's lazy will have, will have regrets. Right? I think probably all of us have this regret. I mean, I have this regret. Is that when we were younger, when we've spoken about the zeal of youth, the energy of the young people, you always have that regret that if you're lazy in your youth and you wasted that time, as a result of your laziness, you wasted time, it just comes back and you regret it. You think, only if I did the things that I could have done when I was younger and I wasn't lazy and I didn't just spend time watching TV and I didn't waste my time. I had that opportunity to do things and I just didn't do them. You see, so the lazy person will always end up a regretful person. Okay, and it's obviously easier said than done, but it's always just about effort, making effort, seeing what we can do to just mind over matter. That's all it is. Getting up when we have to get up, or go to your lesson when it's time for your lesson. Study the Deen, recite Quran when it's time to recite Quran, and that person who's not lazy. The next day they will always think, "Oh, Alhamdulillah, I did what I needed to do yesterday." They will always be ahead of the game. Okay. So laziness. All right. Mm, okay, inshallah, I think we'll leave it there today and we'll finish off this chapter next week. And then we'll start chapter six, the beginning of study, its amount and its organization. So a very practical lesson next week. The beginning of study, its amount and its organization. That's chapter six. So we'll finish chapter five next week and then we'll start chapter six. Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq to continue learning
Ameen.
and understanding and reading and try to embody these qualities that we've spoken about. Ameen wa
Ameen.
akhiru da'wana. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, see you next week. Assalamu
Inshallah.
alaikum wa
Wa
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.